evening, we have John Hutchison with his anti-gravity devices and all kinds of wonderful things where he pulls metal apart and, doesn't put it back together, but, things flying all over. It's just fantastic. You're just going to love it. So stay tuned. We're going to be back shortly. Welcome to Evolving Ideas. I'm Elaine Smitha, and my guest is John Hutchison. He is a scientist, a very serious scientist. Some call him an amateur, but I have to tell you, he's a pro. And he is also an inventor of some marvelous things that could become common usage to us in the future. Join me in welcoming John Hutchison.
Hi, Elaine. It's been a real nice pleasure being here with you today.
Well, it's wonderful to have you back.
Thank you. It's fun coming down here.
Yeah, we've done several shows before.
That's true.
And I just think you're doing some really terrific stuff, and I love to bring this kind of information to my viewers. To get to be right on the cutting edge of everything that's happening and in the world that is not publicly addressed yet. They're not. It's on. We're not finding it on mainstream.
Not really. No, not too much.
Not too much.
No.
Sometimes in Star Trek, we might kind of consider the possibility, but it hasn't really come through in our common usage.
Well, being a Star Trek fan of such magnitude, that wearing my little pins here.
Yeah, I want to talk about that. You're wearing these medallions, it looks like, I'm sure from the audience, but tell us about these.
Well, they're basically from Star Trek, the motion pictures that were done in the 1980s.
Uh-huh.
And being a Trekkie, I love to proudly wear my pins wherever I go, and usually that's including U.S. Customs and Canadian Customs.
Oh, cool. Well, why don't we talk about that? You have such exciting moments when you cross the border with all your gear.
It's becoming like a little show unto itself when I go across into the U.S., into the U.S. Customs. So
what happens when you cross the border and you've got metal samples and machinery and all this kind of thing?
Well, usually because they have to X-ray it, they of course they want to know what these things are. And looking at yours truly here with his long hair and these
Star Trekky things,
yeah,
they think you're weird right off.
Well, they say, well, one of them said, well, oh my goodness, I was going to Southern California and I'm going by aircraft, and one of them says, well, what do we have here? And he sort of looks at me and I said, hi, how are you doing today? And I'm going to California, and he said, gee, you're a Trekkie. Showed him my passport and all that, and then he was very interested in finding out where he could purchase these pins.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So he opened a little side door on the booth and was actually writing down where he could possibly find these for his friends. So I was also carrying some other material, that photographs of Deep Space Nine, one of the guests down on the Paramount Studios, and showing him all that, and he's, oh, wow. And then we get into the metal samples, and he said, well, how does this happen? And it starts going on and on to the point where I have to say I'm going to either miss my aircraft, or if I'm traveling by car down to one of your last shows, I was detained for an hour because they're going through all my papers.
I remember that the last time you came. You couldn't get here for an hour because they kept you at the border.
Well, they're wondering how these samples were being... Well, how did that get like that? And they're looking through these documents and they see letters, or little cards from President Clinton and other officials and all sorts of characters. And it was 1 hour delay. And I was actually, by that time, we're free to go. And I said, well, you can, they want to know more things. That's why you can watch it on TLC. They're re-airing it all the time. And they're sort of following me along the counter, and I'm sort of wanting to get out the door into the car,
Oh, my goodness.
And he's sort of like that. And
he's following you.
Yeah, he's following me. So, well, just check the TV guide. And so I'm just coming down this time. I gave a demonstration of crystal converter to the people. And
at the immigration.
Yeah, he was quite happy. He just says, get out of here. He didn't even x-ray anything.
Yeah, well, you fascinate him, that's why.
So here you got this long-haired character carrying a stack of vitamins. I'm doing my life extension research still.
Yes.
And these broken up bars of metal, like this, and these things that look like they could be a bomb or something with wires hanging out of them and powering stuff and documents and that. So no problems. I kind of like it.
You're amazing. Well, we've titled this show Skunk Works, so a lot of people aren't going to know anything about Skunk Works. So do you want to explain that?
Best as I can, as I understand, the Skunk Works industry is a military-industrial complex where they have what they call money that disappears without any trace. It is usually in billions of dollars, and it goes into such projects like Area 51 and other aspects of the government where they're doing highly classified experiments in energy, gravity propulsion, and also biological sciences.
Biological sciences.
And yeah, they're into studying gene manipulation, gene therapy, also antidotes for genetic things. It's part of a massive area in the military-industrial complex. I was involved in that area in the 1980s during the Ronald Reagan Star Wars program with certain individuals, and all of that usually is, after 4 months it was all classified, and then there was a friend of mine from McDonough Douglas Aerospace that didn't do a classification on a test run, a controlled experiment, and after that there was the Canadian government got involved and did a semi-classification.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Interesting. Well, you were rated up in BC early on.
That was when I was
when your government was confiscating your equipment.
That whole mystery took place when I was in Europe. I was actually leaving Canada to immigrate into Germany to set up all these labs and experiments again. So what happened while I was away was the government confiscated the lab, mostly 22 tons of it, all Tesla machinery. And they tried to keep it secret, but the main Vancouver newspapers found out about it and put it on the front page of the Vancouver Sun newspaper. And so when I got back from Europe to Canada, I tried to trace down where the lab went to, and I was just stonewalled. I was told by one member of Parliament that it cost $22,000 to move it. And then later on, maybe about...
well, 22 tons and $22,000 to move it?
20,000. I think it was $20,000 to move it.
But it was 22 tons.
22 tons.
So we're looking at about, $1,000 per ton.
Well, they gave back to me a whole stash of firearms and antique firearms and also a bunch of test equipment.
Really? So you got some of it back?
6 tons to 7 tons. And I was told by them to put this in operating order in a closed environment, but I could not retrieve all the Tesla machines. So at that point, I made a decision to immigrate to Germany and sell everything off to ham radio operators, which I did do.
You did?
I did, yeah.
You moved to Germany?
No, that was my goal, and some other interventions from Japan and other countries curtailed that.
Like what?
Well, there was Japanese interests that really wanted me to go to Japan and were very supportive and understanding and gave me money and
really?
That. Oh, yeah. I was inspired to retrieve my metal samples and documentation.
From the government?
Actually, the government didn't get any of the documentation or the metal samples, just the machinery.
Oh, interesting.
So all their papers, documents, original stuff I have, they missed that one. They missed their social...
Well, thank God for small favors.
Well, usually government people are a little dumb sometimes, and they missed out on all the important stuff, like all the phone numbers and all the documentation, which is at least a cubic yard of material. And these samples here are about 800 pounds of different samples, which were tested by Los Alamos and Sandy Labs in New Mexico and all the German labs. So they missed all that part, but took all the Tesla equipment.
So what was it about the Tesla equipment that they wanted? Just because it was Tesla's equipment?
No, basically the Tesla equipment was a replication.
Right, but I mean, to have this kind of equipment that you put back together, put together, they just wanted that?
Well, the sea was used in the old Star Wars program, both Canadian and U.S.
Really?
To affect objects and levitate these objects into the air as a form of propulsion.
So they used it?
Well, I had contracts, not within my control, with Ferris Technologies to work with these people on show and tell of levitations and experiments and that, and did approximately maybe 5 major tests with different agencies of the U.S. government and Canadian, one with the Canadian government in Ottawa. And behind that was the Deputy Prime Minister, Eric Nielsen, who ordered his deputies down to film, videotape all the experiments through the Scientific Technical Intelligence Agency. And actually, I got part of that classified part of the classified documentation says that they lobbied, senators lobbied in the House of Commons for Ferris Technologies.
Really?
For the Hutchison Effect.
Honestly.
It's like this whole thing can go on for hours, and actually is a fuel for a movie.
Yes, I think so.
Yeah, it's highly involved, but I like to keep documentation because it's so unbelievable, some of the things that have happened. Mm-hmm. That I can actually say, well, look, here's these letters, here's these documents, here are these slides and bits and pieces of film and stuff that they slipped me.
And I hope you have this duplicated, and the second set is someplace that you're not revealing its location of, right?
This is true. I've been dumping it out over years to different countries, and especially in Japan, and duplication. I also have a friend just recently who works for Jane's Defense Weekly for Advanced Propulsion and Technology. He's the journalist. I first met him in 1998. A very nice person and very wise, a very brilliant journalist. And he was highly interested in the black budget, and came to me for some advice and phone numbers and contacts.
Really?
And then he went out to actually do 2 shows. One was called Widow's Lane.
Yes.
And the other was called The $1 Billion Question, the black budget money.
Yes, that's the big mystery.
The big mystery. So when number 1 aired, that was, I think, over a year ago. Number 2 aired in June 29, I believe. June 23 or 29. And after that aired, I started getting phone calls.
Really?
From people who saw the show. I didn't see the show. I didn't even know it was on. And they say, well, John, you know what was shown? I said, no, I have no idea. Well, they were showing your stuff down at Lockheed Martin's Skunk Works. I said, what? And then I got some people in Michigan who were trying to do a motion picture on me, mail to me the video.
Mm-hmm. Okay, we're going to take a real quick break here.
Sure.
I just want to remind my viewers, or those of you who just tuned in, we're talking with John Hutchison, who is the creator of the Hutchison Effect, and we're discussing the Skunk Works that have the black budget to do all kinds of things that we don't know about or not supposed to know about. And so I want to hear more about this. Now, go ahead.
About the Skunk Works industry.
Yeah.
It's like Area 51 is one of the main big ones. It's where they do advanced propulsion experiments. Fort Worth, Texas is part of that connection, of course, and right into the Pentagon and all the other agencies that branch out from it. But Area 51 is the most noted. Mm-hmm.
And that's not even on the map, you know.
No, it's officially not on the map.
But everybody knows it's there. In fact, Art Bell used to tell about in Pahrump, you know, that they'd have a bus downtown to take the workers out there, and they'd have a big sign on the side that said Area 51 on the bus. But it doesn't exist.
This place doesn't exist.
I thought that was really good. That is really good. So, was there something else you wanted to add? Because we do have a clip of Colonel Alexander, I believe, and Boyd Bushman.
Let's see. I do know Lieutenant Colonel John B. Alexander for a number of years, and still in slight contact with him on a friendly basis. As
that's good.
He's sort of a mysterious person, but he is sort of the link to perhaps Skunk Works people. I do not know a lot of things I don't know, but again, I worked with John on the Star Wars thing in '83, and he makes some interesting comments on this clip, and then from there we go to Boyd Bushman.
Okay, so if they're ready, we can roll that now. And that clip with Colonel Alexander. Let's see if they're ready for that. There we go.
Who is John Hutchison? A quack or a yet-to-be-discovered Tesla? That's what the scientific community wanted to know. Tom McDonough, an MIT-trained astrophysicist, puts the Hutchison Effect into perspective.
We know a lot about electricity. Since the 19th century, we've known the basic laws of electricity and magnetism and how they're tied together. And no one has ever found a way of connecting these laws of electricity and magnetism to the law of gravity. Now, if Mr. Hutchison's effect were proven correct, then he would certainly win a Nobel Prize like that. And it would revolutionize physics. It would mean that we would have space travel that would be inexpensive and easy to do using some kind of an anti-gravity technique.
Combing retired Navy ships for parts, Hutchison cobbled together a wide range of sophisticated equipment that he dismantled, purchased, and took back to his lab. From his cramped apartment, John Hutchison continued his experiments. But what could he achieve with all of this antiquated equipment? Working with only an innate feel for electricity, Hutchison patched together an odd sequence of high-voltage components, including a Van de Graaff generator and spark gap generator.
The other piece of apparatus used was the Tesla coil, which is a clever, similar to a Van de Graaff generator, but it's really a powerful alternating current transformer. So what these pieces of apparatus all have in common is that they generate high voltages.
By linking these high-voltage devices, Hutchison had apparently created an electromagnetic field where objects appeared to levitate.
It is possible to levitate things with this apparatus, meaning that you can charge up objects. Some of these smaller objects there, for example, pieces of plastic, could be charged up with a great deal of electricity from this kind of apparatus, and it could be made to levitate in the electrical field because, as you know, a positive charge repels a positive charge. So if you have an object which is charged positively and it's above a plate that's charged positively, then it can actually be repelled.
I hit upon this energy effect about 1979, although I didn't think anything of it. As it kind of leaked out into the Canadian scientific community.
Although Hutchison is unable to explain the process, his film shows its alleged effects. The supposed ability to levitate objects and change the shape and molecular structure of metals.
It spiraled off pretty quickly from there. I was then surrounded by U.S. Army intelligence and Naval Research Intelligence in Los Alamos National Laboratory.
It wasn't long before word of the mysterious Hutchison Effect reached the highest levels of military intelligence. If the Hutchison Effect was legitimate, the military wanted to get their hands on it. Colonel John Alexander, an expert in weaponry and alternative energy, was then stationed at the top-secret Los Alamos Laboratory in New Mexico. Today, he is a consultant to the Secretary of Defense.
In the early 1980s, I was in the U.S. Army assigned to Intelligence and Security Command. Some mutual friends came up with a tape which was of an 8mm film that showed some pretty remarkable events that we could not understand. When we first viewed the tape, it had a number of different kinds of interactions, and that's really what made it attractive. We saw things that were, hovering in the air. We had things that were accelerating.
The first step at Los Alamos was to determine that the effects pictured were not an elaborate hoax. After careful scrutiny, Alexander concluded that the events in the film were not fabricated, and that the Hutchison Effect was worthy of further investigation.
There was just enough on tape to make it tantalizing enough to follow through on. So it was decided that we would fund the project far enough to see basically a show and tell. A proof of principle.
In 1983, Colonel Alexander and his team of scientists went to Vancouver, hoping this backyard scientist had actually discovered a new energy source. As seen on film,
There we go. That was fascinating.
Well, that's just one of them.
Oh my golly. Oh, this is awesome. I'm always curious about where this money for the black budget comes from, and it's been alleged that it's coming from drug money. Do you have any information on that?
No, I wouldn't have it. I don't know about drug money.
Don't know anything about that. Well, some people are surmising that.
It's a very, very complex world. I think what it is that...
That's true.
Yeah, well, I think what happens there... I think, Elaine, yeah, some of these agencies where all this money slipped under without going through the public eye.
Right.
And it goes into all these military-industrial complex things to operate, and it's funded that way.
Yeah, interesting. Fascinating. Well, then you met somebody from... or you got hold of this information about Boyd Bushman, who was with Lockheed Martin.
Lockheed Martin Skunk Works. My friend from United Kingdom, from England, Nick Cook, uncovered this just this year in June. In June. Yeah. And then
this is hot off the press.
Hot off the press, and it aired, and I started getting telephone calls. I didn't see it on TV. I wasn't alerted to that it was on there. But then the next day, I was getting all these calls mostly from Southern California and then from Michigan.
Really?
Saying, John, well, do you know what happened? I said, no. And then they said, well, you should be getting some money out of this because they got your stuff there and they're working on it. And I said, what? I said, who was the narrator? And then, of course, I found out it was Nick Cook. I said, aha. Nick has been really drilling away at these big walls, getting the information out. So
you got in touch with him?
I emailed him, phone talked to him on the telephone, and then I took all the documentation I have with phone numbers. In the old days, I just photocopied the whole works, put it in a massive box, and sent it off to him, saying, Nick, go for it, because they're still trying to hammer away where they can find the videos that they classified on my work and other documentation. So apparently he's still hammering away at it and maybe put a book out on it.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
So did you get any residuals out of this?
Well, he was going to contact me last weekend, talk to me on the telephone, and he didn't do that. There was probably another TLC show in the works, and
I see.
They all seem to know each other, but he exposed this whole thing, and I was quite amazed.
So we have a clip of Boyd Bushman. So maybe if they're ready to roll with that, this would be a good time. We'll see. If I get it ready. There we go.
Tell me something he wasn't allowed to talk about. So I asked him about the holy grail of science fiction, anti-gravity propulsion.
I do notice in recent publications that one of the latest group of my colleagues have said that they have evidence because of the separation of the galaxies that there is an anti-gravity. I went back to some of the first work on gravity done by Galileo, and he climbed his Leaning Tower of Pisa and dropped 2 stones. They arrived at the ground at the same time. I climbed my Leaning Tower of Building 500 here at the company, and I dropped my 2 weights that were exactly the same weight, and they did not arrive at the ground at the same time. I had purposely placed opposing magnets that didn't like each other, like 2 norths together, and I had already done an iron filing test that showed that it was showering out an entire magnetic plane, and I wanted to see how that magnetic plane interfaced with gravity.
He showed me a film of extraordinary experiments that had been done in Canada 10 years ago. A scientist there appeared to have found a way of getting objects to defy gravity by beaming different energy waves at them. Most people had written it off as a conjuring trick, but Bushman took it seriously and was trying to develop his own techniques.
I'm refining and heading towards something that all you have to do is charge, and it is lifting up. It is losing weight. When we complete the technology, it should fly.
Fascinating. Absolutely fascinating.
That blew my socks off when I saw it, too.
Well, I guess it would. Here, all these people are talking about what you're doing, John. You don't even know what they're saying.
Oh, that's true. That's. I only know a little bit like that, and the rest is all going out there, and I'm always the last to find out about these things.
Interesting. That's really fascinating. Well, we have a sample here. I think it's a good time to show this thing that you've got there, this aluminum.
This is what they call extrusion aluminium alloy, or used in engineering and machining and that. It's not a casting. And what has happened here is that from the nucleus out, there's been a tremendous release of energy at a distance on this thing. This would normally sit on a milk crate or a wooden box without catching fire or anything like that. And sometimes we'd find samples with wood, perhaps, inside of it.
And this came from where?
This came from the 1988 tests. This is one of perhaps several hundred samples I have.
So where did you get this bar in the first place?
This would have been bought at a scrapyard for perhaps maybe a couple of dollars. And because I used to do a lot of machine tool work. You're making Tesla machinery, you need a lot of metals.
That's
and that.
true.
So the range of metals go to aluminium to stainless steel bars of this size and bigger. And on this particular bar, however, there has some Canadian coinage impressed in it.
Well, was that there when you got the bar?
No, this was coins were put on top to see what would happen.
You put them on. And what did you do to it you laid the coins on top. Okay, I guess I'm trying to figure out, you've got coin marks on the top of here and on the other side. So did you start on one side and then flip it over and do it again?
No, basically on examination of videos, other metals are attracted to different metals, like let's say copper to aluminum or wood to aluminum, or even...
Wood is attracted to aluminum?
I have a block of aluminum with a chunk of wood inside it, which is quite unusual. And under fluorescent analysis and spectrum analysis and electron microscopes, what they do is they scan the surface and they actually can find deposits of pure atomic elements in there, like copper and calcium. And
so are you saying, I guess I'm trying to find out, this wasn't anything that you did to this. Was this in the bar, or did you do it as part of one experiment or two experiments, or?
Oh, this would be like for maybe one experiment.
One experiment. Okay. So did you strap these on there? Because you've got them all over it on different sides. No,
I didn't strap it. I just sat it down and put bits of coins on there. This one actually got inside somehow.
I see that. Well, you've got marks over here and on the other side as well.
Yeah, it tends to almost, like on some of the video footage I do have, you can see where the other metals, like nuts and bolts and things, will start to come close to it and work its way in.
Really?
Yeah. And it looks kind of interesting. And this material, this metal, will turn almost like a jelly. You can actually see it wiggle around and fall apart in this configuration. It's very soft. And anything, if it should roll over, let's say like this, they do roll over, and there's coins down here, then of course it just impress them inside.
Okay, so this is when you're impacting it with an energy field. Is that correct?
Yes.
And
a high frequency Tesla waves broadband and up to 24 centimeters narrow bands within an electrostatic field.
Okay, and was this copper coin laying on top and merged into it that way?
Well, I think so. I could have been laying on the table, but when I'm operating the equipment, I very rarely see the effects that happen.
Right, until afterwards.
Because there's either a camera on it or other observers that will observe the effects and videotape it for me, because I'm too busy operating the machinery. So,
John, when this splits, when this bent and burst apart, I guess that's what you would say. Is that what happened? Or did you, while it was still in a molten state, pick it up and bend it? Or, is this happening while you're doing, I guess I'm trying to find out whether once you hit this with the energy, does it stay that way or does it solidify when you remove the energy field.
When the field is lifted at a distance from this could be sitting maybe up to 50 feet away from the equipment, it will solidify. There's no heat involved in this. It'll solidify when I turn everything off.
Right. That's what I wanted to know.
The scientists will go in and pick it up and look at it and examine it.
Right. Okay. Well, that's what I was wondering, whether or not it, whether it stayed in this jelly-like configuration after you removed this and then later solidified, or whether it was solidifying immediately as soon as you removed the force.
Yeah, no, it turns solid, and sometimes what happens on, let's say on steel samples, big steel samples, at the end of it turns soft into another material.
Really?
Yeah.
How interesting.
Like a transmutation effect.
What kind of material would it form in?
We found a material that was on a 3-inch steel bar, was combination of silicon, iron, and copper, an impossible combination of materials that they could not identify as an alloy.
Wow.
In Germany and also at Los Alamos.
Well, hang on. I just want to let my viewers know what we're doing here.
Okay.
My guest is John Hutchison. He is the creator of the Hutchison Effect from Vancouver, BC, and we are discussing his experiments here, and we're talking about an aluminum bar that he has created all kinds of transformations in this through the use of field energies. And he was just explaining, so we're going to talk a little bit more. This is the Evolving Ideas with Elaine Smitha, and I am Elaine Smitha. So stay tuned here. We're going to learn more. Okay, so we've already discussed that this stays during the force field. Now, how long do you have that field energized?
On the longest samples, I'll start at what I call calibration of the equipment, and then I'll start to search for effects. Now, the effects could be such things as, instead of the metal going into the shape, it could be levitating in the air. Any materials will levitate in the air, up to 1,500 pounds recorded on video. 1,500
pounds?
Yeah. A Siemens transformer that has been recorded by George Liscazis of Pinnacle Oil. And some of the lighter samples are around 60 pounds, 40 pounds, maybe 80 pounds.
Interesting.
And they levitate, and also not only metals, but water, plastic, and ice cream.
Yeah, ice cream.
Which is all videotaped and documented over and over again. Even for Canadian TV, we had foam levitating, and it was put on the Canadian national news.
So there doesn't seem to be any restraint on materials. It seems to occur no matter the material.
No matter the material. It's very selective in what it wants to pick up. Although
really?
Rarely. It'll pick up the entire materials and levitate the whole...
All at once?
In the air, yeah.
That's kind of curious when you were saying that it was selective, because you could almost have a table full of different materials, which we have seen in some of the footage that you've done, and then it sort of... I mean, this is kind of an interesting thing too. You know, which one resonates with that force field, the energy, and responds. It's almost like it's sort of saying, "Hey, me, I'm next."
I'm next. Let me go for it. Let me go for it.
I mean, it's pretty amazing when you think about because we have seen them sitting out there on the table, and all these different things seem to levitate at different moments in time. Now, the one of the cannonball, which is one of the things I really love, and we kind of showed it in one of these clips, what so fascinates me about that is that it looks like hands are turning it.
Yeah.
How does that happen, John?
Well, the cannonball was what they call a semi-flotation. And there's disturbances, of course, in that region of time and space where the cannonball would tend to actually jerk around, go around and float up and down, but not take off because... Well, lucky it didn't take off because I might have been pushed through the wall or something.
Really? Or you'd have your equipment damaged or whatever.
It was 1, 2, 3 walls away from the lab. It was in a whole separate room where these main effects were happening.
Interesting.
So if it did take off, it wouldn't damage the equipment, but perhaps the wall it sure would.
Now, you made some allusion here that in the variation, you're doing some variation in the frequencies as you're doing this. Did I understand you correctly to say that?
Yes.
So you have a range starting at one place, and what's your range?
Well, my range is basically, it all depends on amplitude, what type of waveform I'm producing, from basically extremely low frequency up to 24 centimeters, which is pretty high frequency. Mm-hmm. And actually, on that frequency, a lot of psychic things have been discovered.
Really?
21 to 24 centimeters. And
interesting.
But however, all those radio waves go out and are also immersed in an electrostatic field. Now, electrostatic field is like the same kind of energy you have in a lightning storm. It's static electricity, non-dynamic electricity.
Well, for some of our viewers who don't know what that means, it means something that's stable, more stable.
When you brush your hair, you get
static electricity.
You get static electricity, mm-hmm. But it's a very powerful source of energy too.
Mm-hmm. And then the dynamic is one that is more active,
like studio lights, and that operates electronics in that. So the combination of the two seems to open up a vortex in time and space to cause this kind of stuff to happen, because you cannot do this with a radio wave or a lightning bolt.
No.
You cannot do that. So in a written paper by René Louis Vallée of France, he suggests that there is a other dimension that opens up when this apparatus is operating to cause these effects. And that paper was accepted by the U.S. government guys in 1983. But what I don't like about the government guys is they keep never returning any of the video footage.
And then they keep it as a big secret.
And they keep it a big secret. If I keep bugging them, they'll slip me like slides taken at the time.
Oh.
Or bits and pieces of information. So I try to keep up a friendly...
kind of a liaison with them.
Yeah, pretty well. I'm still in contact with John Alexander. And I sort of get people say, well, why are you mixed up with him for? I said, well, people are people. I mean, he hasn't come over and threw a bomb through my window or anything. I mean, I believe in, if you put out positive energy.
Mm-hmm. That's what you get back.
That's what you get back. I mean, why put out negative stuff? I don't believe in that world. Mm-mm. I believe in keeping a fine balance, and I'll phone up to CIA headquarters and ask for maybe what's new in UFO stuff you can release.
Really?
And they release it, and I just make out a money order. It's like, oh, so much for so many copies for $50, make it out to the Receiver General of the United States, or how it goes like that. So I just keep out this kind of like, carefree attitude. Oh, how are you doing today? It's cool, you know. I don't want to put out the negative stuff.
Mm-hmm. I think that's good.
Because that can hit you.
Yeah. It reverberates back. It's a boomerang effect, really, is what happens. Yeah. Well, now, what about the U.S. Eldridge? Now, did that... I mean, we started talking some of this time shifting and plane differentials and all that. Did some of this happen? Does this kind of thing happen on the Eldridge? And for some of our viewers who don't know anything about the Eldridge, this happened at in the Philadelphia experiment.
The Philadelphia experiment, where it was called it was called Project Invisibility, mm-hmm. And they wanted to make the warships. It was a frigate warship, invisible, by putting a very powerful magnetic field around it, and in some ways it was also used to repel mines, and also they had Tesla frequencies running in there, and on an accidental situation, the whole ship disappeared. But also in the bay, you could also see where the hull is without seeing the hull. It was like the imprint of the hull was in the water.
Unbelievable.
And the thing was transported back New York, somewhere there.
New York. Mm-hmm.
Somewhere. And then it did come back to its original location, but then the hull was cracked like this here. And a lot of different stories are around it, of course, and of course history tends to make a lot of interesting stories up. But however, it was 1940s technology, and they used powerful. In those days, they were very dynamic. We do it, with big coils and big energy, and quite different to our modern age now with light computer equipment. And
right.
That. So in those days, nothing was impossible to achieve. So the Eldridge, I keep hearing rumors that it could be in the Greek Navy.
Uh-huh.
And in 1982, I suggested if I kept my frequencies, if I tighten up the frequencies that I was using by Dr. Gaio Belinsky of New York, that I would get similar results like in the Philadelphia experiment.
Oh, really?
And then, of course, what came to light on analysis of Super 8 film, not video, it's a Super 8 film, was that some of my samples were semi-transparent, as
really
said by Dr. L.A. Kuhn, head of DSTI.
What's that?
He's the Director of Scientific Technical Intelligence of Canada and was in charge of this analysis of the tape and that, and the group that I mentioned previous that lobbied for Ferris Technologies in the Senate.
Wow.
So it's like I said, it gets in there, but he did quite an amazing report, which was a matter of national security, and I got my member of parliament to work with me to release it in part to me, which I did get this report, but not the videos again. So my member of parliament was very, in his letters to me, he said it's a matter of national security. He'll try his best to get CSIS, Canadian Security Intelligence Service, to release it to me, and they released some of the information to me.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's quite fascinating. It's quite fascinating.
I'm just curious now. I think Einstein was involved with that. I heard that he was early on involved with the Eldridge project on that. On that Project Invisibility.
That's quite true.
And then he bowed out. Apparently, he wanted more time to figure it out, and they didn't want to give him any more time, and they put somebody else in charge of that. Is that correct?
That's correct. They had quite actually a number of scientists at that time involved in it, and there's even some rumors they were using Tesla technologies at that time too. But a lot of the stuff is, it unfortunately is vague, and you can't really get the evidence in these things. Mm-hmm. So it becomes almost like a paper chase.
That's true. And another thing I think about the Eldridge just reminded me of what you're doing here is that the reports were that bodies were caught within the frame superstructure of the ship itself and trapped there, and then many died in that. And I've interviewed Al Bielek, who claims to be one of the survivors from the Eldridge, and he just told horror stories about it. But would that have been the same energy that you're using, that same basic energy? I mean, embedding things in, turning that metal into something like a jelly, and these sailors would get trapped inside there, and then it would solidify again? Is that...
It sounds pretty close to what these experiments here have done.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it reminds me of it.
It reminds me of it too when they speak of that time period, which leads me to believe if the Eldridge went through that kind of torture, why would it be sold to the Greek Navy?
Exactly. Were they using it? I did hear that before, too, that it was sold to the Greeks.
Yeah. You see, if I knew where the ship was, I'd want to go there and take samples and take pieces of the equipment off there to really study it. But again, you're running into this rather foggy, elusive stuff that you can't really get a handle on it. And it's kind of disappointing to a lot of scientists that would want to investigate that.
Mm-hmm. Really?
The technology in that time period was very strong, and ham radio people and scientists were into high voltage, were into unique things that use powerful magnetic fields and high voltage fields, and it was a time of invention. And popular science, popular mechanics would write up all these wonderful, inventive ideas what you could do in making levitators.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Well, I want to let my viewers know you are watching Evolving Ideas with Elaine Smitha, and I am Elaine Smitha, and my guest is John Hutchison, who is the creator of the Hutchison Effect from Vancouver, BC, and we're talking about levitation and materials that are being embedded in one another, and it's a fascinating story. I wanted to know, is there some constructive use for that effect?
The constructive use of the effect itself would be elimination of nuclear waste, which I attended a conference in 1997.
Oh, interesting. In what regard? How would that work, John?
If it can manipulate this kind of metal like this, it can surely manipulate and destroy nuclear material and waste.
Destroy it? Mm-hmm. Would that just eliminate it totally?
I would like to sort of say that I think it could. I would say that I would go then from that point to one of my colleagues, Ken Shoulders, who's a lot more brilliant than I am in regards to this technology. And he has an idea using charge cluster technology to actually lock in time and space, the nuclear waste, so it's no longer a problem.
So how would that work, John? Say we had a big dump here in front of us full of nuclear waste. Mm-hmm. Okay, how would that work? What would it take to do that? Okay,
first there was the Baser project, which is more boson particle.
Baser project?
Yeah, of UCLA, which would have beamed in high-powered energy in there that makes a laser look like a flashlight.
Really?
To destroy the nuclear waste, but it takes so much power to juice this thing that it's impractical. So then Ken Shoulders has what is called charged cluster technology, where this stuff is frozen in time and space. It's just dismantled. And he feels on a very big scale that, on a mega scale, that his technology could actually be the answer to the nuclear waste problem. And I remember being with Ken. We meet with politicians and other politicians, and they just write down notes, but there's no real...
No action.
No action. And, I'm supportive of Ken. Ken has a very, I'm just an amateur. Ken is a highly brilliant scientist and can see all the different things that could be done with these technologies.
And he projects it out. I remember seeing a television interview with him where they were demonstrating. He was demonstrating that in his lab, and I'd love to interview him. So
he'd be one of the good
maybe
ones.
we can make arrangements with him to come up and do that. That would just be fantastic. I think it's nice to know that there are scientists working to find solutions to this nuclear waste problem. That looks really promising. Because we hear a lot of talk and a lot of complaining, but we don't see anything happening to make the effect. And now we have so much nuclear waste in this country alone, buried, and who knows how long those containers are going to contain all of that before they certainly, dilapidate, or the material penetrates through and radiates all the land around there. I mean, it could be really quite devastating.
It would be highly devastating, and it's sort of, people tend to always forget in history about these things. Oh, well, the Cold War thing's over, but they don't realize that all that stuff is still sitting there.
That's right.
And a lot of it's in the ocean, and it could come out like a disease, right out and do a lot of pollution and damage. I think also in the propulsion aspects of this, that NASA could use rocket ships to take the nuclear waste, let's say, and that's another approach.
I've heard this, taking it to Mars is what I've heard.
Not to Mars, but dump it into the sun.
Oh, I haven't heard that one. I've heard...
That's what I would do, because the sun is all nuclear and
that's right.
Fusion.
It is.
And with advanced propulsion technology, like what they're working on in Area 51, to gather a large mass of this stuff and safely dump it into the sun would be another one. But I think I sense a little bit of risk with that in case, let's say, there was some kind of a malfunction.
Yeah, really.
You'd have a heck of a mess on your hands.
You certainly would. And I just wonder about, even though you've got all this tremendous energy on the sun, how do we know that there wouldn't be a counteraction?
It's to the sun. The sun is so vast that our minds can't comprehend its size.
Well, I mean that, I know that, but I'm thinking about the nuclear energy components themselves, but you're talking about shipping via rocket up there, right? Do we know enough about this nuclear material to be able to rely upon its being totally destroyed without any side effects going into the sun? Or is there the possibility that there could be other things in the transformation that would change it into another form that would be airborne?
I think the greatest danger, Elaine, is getting it off the Earth, first accumulating it into a situation where you can then get it off the Earth. But I think that really putting it into the sun wouldn't. The sun would just say, "Oh, what? Nothing." It wouldn't even recognize it.
It wouldn't even recognize it. Well, I know that there's a group in Seattle who are Mars buffs, and I was getting a bunch of emails about. They were all really enthusiastic about taking the nuclear waste up to Mars and dumping it on Mars. And I remember I communicated with Tom Bearden, who is a brilliant scientist in his own right, and I asked him about it, and he said that's sheer insanity. He really felt that the major danger would be getting it off of Earth because you can't rely upon the rockets. They're undependable, and so that would be very high risk to do that.
Too high to do that, I think, even with advanced propulsion, because I think in this method here, and Ken Shoulder's work, and maybe perhaps a bit of my work, that it could be done in an isolated condition on Earth. And also, why destroy our next home?
Our next home?
Our next home. This is Nutsville land. You know, some people are...
Well, I mean, I thought they were... When I got this email from them, you know, I said, this is insanity.
No, of course, Elaine, it's nutty.
You know, and then I get this, well, have you got a better suggestion?
Yes, very Elaine, it's just a matter of backward thinking or something.
I just have a hard time with it.
Well, they haven't been taking their vitamins or something.
Well, I just think sometimes it's almost Star Trek imagination kind of thing, you know. They get this idea and then they think that this is the answer, and then they all start dialoguing about it, but it never goes anyplace because you've got non-scientists doing all of this debating.
Yeah.
You know, and good ideas often go awry and they don't all fly.
No, I mean, unfortunately, a lot of these ideas are distracting investors to invest in things that don't work, where people like Ken Shoulders,
serious scientists,
with the investments, and Thomas Bearden and many others that I know, if investment money went towards them, they'd have proper solutions and they know how to do it. A lot of these people that think they got the answer just... I've seen too much of it. They don't have the answer. They have good intentions. A lot of them.
Exactly.
It's just that they don't have the scientific knowledge to really make it fly, as Boyd Bushman says.
No, really. Yeah. It's amazing that this whole thing just seems to be so close to what we see in the Star Trek, and I think that Gene Roddenberry was really brilliant in his concept. And you told an interesting story about him to me today, about selling his show. Can you share that with the viewers?
Selling the show of Majors?
No, Gene Roddenberry in his whole Star Trek.
Oh, in the theme of selling it to, this is what I love about this, was that he took this small, tiny little pilot to NBC Studios and presented it to the heads of NBC there, and they looked at this thing and they started scratching their head and saying, what the heck, Gene, you know, this is like, and you got a lady as #1 commander? This is not, this is nonsense stuff. This is crazy. It was Jeffrey Hunter and Major Brett Roddenberry, Gene's wife. And a wonderful person in real life. In those days, in the 60s, they really didn't want to air somebody with pointed ears and a lady that was #1 and all this other stuff. They said it wasn't going to work.
Right. Well, of course, just giving women a command
would
upset
stupid.
the men.
So what happened was that Gene put enough energy in there where they did air it. And it aired. And it caught on so great that and Gene did this. He loved doing these things. The first interracial kiss was on television.
Oh, really?
On Star Trek. So what happened was it was pulled after 3 years, and then everybody started rebelling. Like everybody around the world was rebelling. We want Star Trek back. Hey,
really?
Come on. So it did come back as one of the first motion picture. And I was in the studio, or not in the studio, but I was in the theater there. Wow, is this ever cool? These big Klingon warships coming over.
Really?
Captain Kirk, my old buddy, back there again, and Bones and all the good old boys, and this is like, yes! So I sat through 3 showings of that, and then it went on to different episodes, and oddly enough, even meeting the people involved in Star Trek later on, and like Kirk Thatcher, and communication with Mrs. Roddenberry and other people that are involved in all that stuff. It's like, wow. And being on Deep Space Nine set as a guest.
Yes, I know. I saw some of your pictures of that. That was really cool.
But it's a vision of Gene Roddenberry that has caught on to actually change a lot on this Earth.
Mm-hmm. He was a visionary.
A visionary, and the stuff is coming true. And right now, my business partner, Grant Romund, is down and might actually go see William Shatner, who's doing a special on all the Star Trek stuff that's coming true.
Oh, is he?
Yeah.
Oh, that's neat.
In Arizona.
That's neat.
He's going to publish a book, too, on it.
William Shatner is?
Yep.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. Grant is a friend of him because he taught him how to fly in his paramotor.
Yeah, that's what he told me.
So
Grant is a sweetheart.
Oh, he's got dynamics, and I have high regards for him and his honesty. So.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes, I was very impressed with him. I just recently met him, but I think he's doing some very good work. Really wonderful work. Well, let's see. I don't know. I don't think we have. I do have here. I do. Oh, we do have the Happy Face Ball, but I don't think we've got it queued for that.
Makes other things in with it. It's funny. Some of the wire modulation. Oh, they want to mate?
This is great. Well, I think we've just covered some wonderful material, and I just want to thank you so much for coming and being my guest. You're just a delight.
I always love it, Elena.
It's wonderful to have you.
Thank you.
That's really great. And so to my wonderful viewers, I'd like to thank you very much for joining me on this episode of Evolving Ideas. And I hope you'll join me next time when we explore yet another avenue of our universe and our relationship to it. I'm Elaine Smitha.